And the next thing I would like to do is have Dr. Kramer talk to you about the RF emission comments from the second speaker.
Before I do, a bit of framing. I've been working for the city continuously as its technical advisor for 32 years now. So essentially every wireless project that's come into the city has gone across my desk at one point or another. So I want to also follow up on what Mark just said about, or Patrick just said about the fact that we can do both. In fact, we're the ones who actually sent notice to the California Wireless Association of this meeting tonight. I presume they're here because of the notice that we sent to them, because we wanted to make sure that the industry, as broadly as possible, had the opportunity to participate. That said, the participation process that Patrick's laid out makes the most sense about adopting tonight and then going through the regular process. So we can accommodate CalWA's request, I think, very comfortably. That said, I'll turn to the other comments that have come in. Most notably, the public is concerned about radio frequency emissions. I know several of the council members have heard me talk about this in the past, but if you'll indulge me for a couple of minutes so that the public at home who's watching this tonight can get a better sense of what's going on, I think it'd be worth it. Back in 1996, the Telecom Act was passed by Congress. One of the provisions in it required the FCC to develop national standards for RF emissions. Prior to that time, local governments could set their own, and there was a patchwork of standards around the country. The FCC took on the task in 1997 and went to public radiological health officials, wireless industry, the military. They looked at standards in other countries, and they came up with a standard for the U.S. The standard for the U.S., by the way, is based on a couple of things. It's not a unitary standard. It reflects the fact that we as people, big bags of water, if you will, absorb certain frequencies more efficiently than others. So the FCC even took that into account. And at the end of the day, they created a standard that had a safety margin built into it. I'm going to use, as a college professor, I think I'm allowed to use a visual aid to explain what that safety standard is. I have a 12-inch ruler. Assume at the top, that's the point where you can actually measure some effect caused by RF, and it's heating. It's not a DNA change. These are non-ionizing emissions, just heating. I have a 12-inch ruler. Assume at the top, that's the point where you can actually measure some effect caused by RF, and it's heating. It's not a DNA change. These are non-ionizing emissions, just heating. So the FCC had to set its national standard for public exposure 24/7, somewhere between 0 and 12. We know they didn't set it at 0 because that means there's no emission. We know they didn't set it at 12 because that's the point where you can actually measure some change. So on this scale of 0 to 12, where did the FCC set its standard? 0.26 inches. And as it turns out mathematically, that means that there's a 50 times 50 safety margin between the maximum we can be exposed without even knowing it and the point where you can actually measure an effect from that exposure. Now, that's the technical part. Let me switch now to the lawyer part, which is this is an area where the FCC completely occupies the field. They are the sole national agency that sets these standards. We can't even adopt the FCC standards as our own. So the question is, and this is in the Telecom Act, this is in the FCC rules, and this is even at state law. The question is, does a proposed project comply with the FCC rules? If it does, then legally, that's as far as we're allowed to take it. There are certainly very thoughtful public concerns about the effects of RF, but at a local government level, like here in Thousand Oaks, we're not allowed to nullify a federal rule. So at the end of the day, one of the things, as you've already heard, that we do, our firm, is we evaluate whether the applicant's project will comply with the FCC rules. And interestingly, there are some times when they've proposed projects that don't. So we've caught those. But I can tell you that the city of Thousand Oaks historically, for a long time, decades, has evaluated compliance with the FCC rules as a threshold standard for approval, which is far more than virtually, well, most other cities. They don't have the technical expertise to do that. So that's kind of the long and short. That's how we got here. That's in terms of the safety margins that are built in, a 50 times safety margin. That's what we're allowed to do legally and what we're not allowed to do under federal, state, and even congressional law. So that's kind of the tour of RF safety. If you have questions, of course, I'll happily answer them. But that's kind of a broad tour of the entire subject. Finally, I think there was a comment about joining the lawsuits. I can tell you that our firm represents the League of California Cities, the League of Oregon Cities, and the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. We filed in the Ninth Circuit to challenge these rules. But at this point, these are the rules that are in effect, and we must follow them until the courts tell us that either they confirm the FCC and say, yes, you got to continue to follow it, or they say no. But we're deeply involved in that process, representing effectively 1,000 jurisdictions, including Thousand Oaks.